For as long as people have made maps, they've been filling in the blank spaces with more than just coastlines and landmarks. These particular islands were born from mistakes, tricks of the light, myths, and sometimes deliberate deceptions. They are classified as phantom islands, land that appeared on charts and in logbooks found throughout time, but actually never existed. But once they were drawn, they took on lives of their own, shaping the way explorers sailed, how nations claimed territory, and how entire generations imagined the world. Each of these islands is a story, not just of the land that wasn't there, but of the people who believed it was. There's an old saying, on maps there are no empty spaces, only a lack of imagination. Hy-Brasil is proof of that. It's an island that existed on maps of the Atlantic for hundreds of years, not just because a cartographer put it there, but because of a myth that refused to die. For centuries, Irish folklore spoke of a place hidden beneath an eternal fog. Once every 7 years, the mist would lift, and an island of paradise would appear. A land ruled by a legendary king, its people touched by the gods. It was a compelling story, but that's all it was. A story, a myth, until it wasn't. In the 14th century, Hy-Brasil moved from folklore into the real world when it appeared on a nautical chart by the Genoese cartographer Angelino Dulcert. And from that point on, it wasn't just folklore anymore, it was geography. For the next 500 years, map after map, generation after generation, the island was there, each version drawn with even more certainty than the last. In the late 1400s, expeditions were launched from Bristol, England, with the sole purpose of finding Hy-Brasil and claiming it. Some believe John Cabot himself stumbled across it on his way to North America in 1497. A Spanish diplomat even claimed the land Cabot found had already been discovered in the past by the men from Bristol who found Brazil. But no matter how many ships sailed, they came back empty. No island, no fog lifting to reveal paradise. Hy-Brasil was never found because it was never there. Hy-Brasil was the perfect storm of circumstances, a cartographic tradition passed down from map to map, generation to generation, a cartographer's wish for a lost and still-to-be-found island in the Atlantic, and a tale of a persistent fog, hiding a magical place. Some phantom islands were accidents. Frisland was not. It was a lie, but such a convincing one that it fooled some of the greatest minds of the age of exploration. The story begins in 1558 with a Venetian nobleman named Niccolò Zeno the Younger. He published a map and a bundle of letters he claimed were written by his ancestors, Niccolò and Antonio Zeno, two sailors who had supposedly roamed the North Atlantic in the 1300s. The letters told a wild story of a journey to the far North Atlantic, of being shipwrecked, and of finding an entire new world of islands. The centerpiece of this discovery was Frisland, a large, detailed island with cities and harbors, located just south of Iceland. Unlike vague sketches of other maybe islands, Frisland was a fully realized place, with cities, harbors, rivers, and mountains, all carefully traced. The Zeno map wasn't just a drawing, it came with a backstory, a reason the island existed and a narrative you could believe. And it worked. The map was so persuasive it found its way into the work of giants like Gerardus Mercator and Abraham Ortelius, the very men who defined how the world looked on paper. For more than a century, Frisland appeared on nearly every major map of the North Atlantic. It became a place explorers aimed for. In 1576, the English navigator Martin Frobisher even claimed to have sighted it, mistaking a chunk of Greenland for the phantom land he expected to see. He wasn't hallucinating. He was following the map. He was searching for a place that he believed was real because the authoritative sources of the time told him it was. The Zeno brothers' letters and map are now widely considered a hoax, a brilliant forgery designed to enhance the Zeno family's reputation. But the legacy of their deception is a fascinating one. Frisland never existed, but on paper it lived for over 100 years, a world built from ink and imagination. It's a reminder of how easily a good story, told with enough detail and told long enough, can pass for truth, until someone finally proves it isn't. For over 400 years, an island called Bermeja was a constant on maps of the Gulf of Mexico. It was first noted on Spanish maps by cartographer Alonso de Santa Cruz in his 1539 compendium, El Yucatán e Islas Adyacentes. The next year, Alonso de Chaves gave its precise coordinates and described it as looking blondish or reddish, which gave the island its name. Bermeja is Spanish for russet, and for centuries its existence was considered a certainty. Then, in the late 1990s, Bermeja's story took a sharp turn. Mexico and the United States were negotiating maritime boundaries in the Gulf of Mexico. These boundaries weren't just lines on a map. They defined who owned the oil and gas reserves beneath the seafloor, and Bermeja was perfectly positioned. If it was a real island, it would extend Mexico's maritime border, giving them a claim to a massive oil-rich area in the Gulf. So, in 1997, the Mexican government launched an official search to verify the island's existence. They sailed to the coordinates, but found nothing except open water. Again in 2009, the National Autonomous University of Mexico conducted an extensive study on behalf of the Mexican Chamber of Deputies. Using advanced sonar technology, the research team confirmed it. The ocean floor at that location was over 1,600 feet deep, and there was no sign that an island was or had ever been there. The absence of Bermeja wasn't an ancient mystery. It was a modern problem with billions of dollars on the line. If Bermeja had been on maps for centuries, why wasn't it there? Conspiracies bloomed. Some whispered the CIA had destroyed it to weaken Mexico's oil claims. Others blamed an earthquake, a volcanic collapse, some catastrophe that swallowed the island whole. Ultimately, the most plausible and least cinematic explanation is the one that's hardest to accept. Bermeja never existed in the first place. It was a cartographer's error. Another misplaced speck of land that got copied, unquestioned, from map to map for centuries. Bermeja is a story of a ghost that lived on paper, and the moment we went looking for it, it dissolved into open water. Some phantom islands were hoaxes, some were legends, but Bus Island was neither. Bus Island was born from one foggy day and a captain's mistake. In the year 1671, the ship Bus of London, captained by Thomas Shepherd, was returning from a voyage to Greenland. According to the captain's report, bad weather and a thick fog threw the ship far off course. When the skies cleared, Captain Shepherd recorded that he saw an island, land where no map showed any. He named it Bus Island, after his ship. Word spread quickly, and soon enough, the island appeared on maps, neatly marked just south of Greenland at 58 degrees north latitude. Unlike other phantom islands, this one had a name, a date, a set of coordinates. For more than a century, Bus Island was accepted as real. It was charted as a landmark for ships crossing the North Atlantic. But there was always a problem. No one could actually find it. Voyages sent to the supposed location turned up nothing but open ocean. Some captains swore they'd seen it, only to admit later it was probably a fog bank. By the 1700s, cartographers began hedging. Maps shrank the island, or labeled it supposed. Its presence faded, little by little, from certainty to full-on doubt. The final nail in the coffin came in 1854, when a detailed British Admiralty survey of the area found no trace of it. The Admiralty officially removed Bus Island from all charts. It was a phantom island whose life spanned just under 200 years, a ghost born from fog and erased by fact. Some phantom islands were born from mistakes, some from lies, and some, like the Isle of Demons, were born from pure human terror. Its story begins with the French noblewoman, Marguerite de la Roque. In 1542, she was on a voyage to the New World with her powerful relative, the Viceroy of Canada, Jean-François de la Roque de Roberval. During the journey, Marguerite fell in love with a young man on board. Roberval found out. Enraged, he stopped the ship and left Marguerite, her new lover, and her elderly nurse on a barren island off the coast of what is now Newfoundland. The island was bleak, a cold, barren rock with nothing to survive on. Within months, both her lover and her nurse were dead. Marguerite was left alone, giving birth to a child who did not survive. For over 2 years, she clung to hope and life, catching fish, scavenging berries, and keeping her sanity in brutal isolation. When she was finally rescued and returned to France, her story spread like wildfire. But with each retelling, the story got darker and darker. The island she described was no longer just a lonely and desolate place where she survived despite all hope. Now it was cursed. It became known as the Isle of Demons, a place that was possessed by spirits and prowled by monstrous beasts that stalked Marguerite day and night. Cartographers took note, and for nearly a century, maps marked the Isle of Demons near the Strait of Belle Isle. Sailors eyed the coastline with dread, convinced the land itself was pure evil. But in truth, the demons were not born from the island. They were born from Marguerite's suffering. Her trauma gave shape to a place that terrified explorers and endured on maps for generations. As the region was charted in greater detail, the name faded, and the Isle of Demons was folded into Newfoundland, eventually disappearing completely. For more than a century, maps showed a place called Emerald Island. The island was first charted in 1821 by the British ship HMS Emerald, which gave the island its name. The ship charted what they believed was land in the icy waters south of Tasmania. In truth, the crew had likely mistaken a massive iceberg for solid ground. But once the Emerald Island was recorded, whether it was real or not, it became fact. From there, cartographers copied it, and for decades, it was just one more island among many, with its coordinates recorded with just as much certainty as the next. Then came 1980. Australia's Bureau of Mineral Resources was working on a project to remap the Earth's gravity field. They needed a stable benchmark in the remote Southern Ocean, and Emerald Island looked perfect. So the naval vessel HMAS Moresby was dispatched with a simple mission: sail to the coordinates, measure the gravity, and confirm the island. They sailed for days, through some of the roughest seas on the planet, but when they reached the spot where Emerald Island was supposed to be, they found nothing. Just the deep, dark, empty ocean. Sonar readings told the rest of the story. The ocean floor was almost 5,000 feet below them. There was no island, and there had never been an island. Emerald Island was nothing more than a trick on the eyes in nearly whiteout conditions that lived on maps for more than 150 years. It's only fitting that the ship that went looking for a benchmark to prove the Earth's gravity found nothing but a metaphorical black hole of ocean. Some phantom islands aren't just places that turn out to have never existed in the first place. Some, like Thompson Island, seem to disappear at the worst possible moment. In 1823, Captain George Powell of the British sealing ship Thompson reported a new island in the South Atlantic, a rocky outpost near the Sandwich Islands. His account was convincing enough that the British Hydrographic Office, the authority on the world's maps, accepted it as fact. Soon, Thompson Island appeared on Admiralty charts as a small, lonely outpost in a vast, empty ocean. But the island was never real. In 1840, the British Antarctic expedition, led by the legendary Captain James Clark Ross, was sailing into the unknown. The mission was one of great scientific importance, and Thompson Island was marked on their charts as a perfect resupply point and a base for their observations. When Ross and his men reached the coordinates, they found nothing. They searched for days, circling the area, burning precious time and resources, but there was no island. There never had been. The mistake wasn't just embarrassing, it was dangerous. The detour put the entire crew of the expedition at risk, forcing them to navigate some of the harshest seas on Earth with fewer supplies than they'd counted on. By 1844, the Admiralty officially removed Thompson Island from its charts. It had been nothing more than a mirage, or perhaps a misidentified patch of sea. But its absence carried real-world consequences. And in a cruel twist, it disappeared at the exact moment someone needed it most. This is the story of Antilla, also known as the Isle of Seven Cities. It starts on land in the 8th century during the Muslim conquest of the Iberian Peninsula. According to legend, 7 Christian bishops fled west with their followers, carrying what they could and leaving their homeland behind. They sailed west, into the great unknown of the Atlantic, and found a new home, a lush, rectangular island where they established 7 holy cities, burning their ships behind them so no one could ever return to the land they had lost. The first known appearance of Antilla on a map was a 1424 nautical chart by the Italian cartographer Zuane Pizzigano. He drew a large, clearly defined island with 7 settlements. For the next century, Antilla appeared on nearly every major chart of the Atlantic. It was a known landmark, a destination for the faithful, and a promise of a new, untouched, fertile land. The belief was so strong that royalty sponsored expeditions to find it. In 1475, King Afonso V of Portugal granted the knight Fernão Teles a royal charter to discover the 7 cities and any other populated islands he might find. But Antilla was never found. Its most lasting legacy was its name. When Columbus and other explorers reached the Caribbean, they called the islands the Antilles, borrowing directly from the phantom island that had been on maps for a century. It's a name given to real islands because of a phantom that had been searched for so long, and never found. Antilla ultimately disappeared from maps as the Atlantic became more and more charted. Antilla was never a real place on Earth. It was a dream carried across an ocean, but powerful enough to leave its name on real maps.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Fireside Unsolved. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to help the channel grow. Until next time, take it easy and be easy, you filthy bastards.